an inquiry after 21 years.
Yes.
Given the fact that your report points out that there were crucial loss of evidence in terms of vital wire tapes, being lost out, being erased by the intelligence agencies. What was the possibility of, doing any kind of justice after an inquiry that happens 21 years after the whole incident has taken place?
The answer to your question is it better to do what you can with an inquiry or not? So there wasn't going to be any harm come from the inquiry. Now, I should tell you that the RCMP always had an open file, but nothing seemed to be happening. Eventually, they raised the hulk of the plane and patched it together. And they could determine from that where the explosion in the plane took place. They had suspects. They arrested 3 people, Bagra, Malik, and Riyadh. Riyadh pleaded guilty to manslaughter, said he was building a bomb to blow up a bridge in Italy. The other 2 pled not guilty. The RCMP, to their credit, that trial was very thoroughly investigated. But again, what happened in part, Riyadh committed perjury at the trial. He's now either been sentenced to another 10 years. The CSIS had 2 women who were good witnesses, but the RCMP scared them just by their tactics. So when they gave evidence, they had a loss of memory. So the trial judge was left with 2 of the women who no longer had any memory, and Riyadh, who had committed perjury. So there was, to him, some doubt, and he had to acquit. Well, that acquittal renewed the exasperation that all these people were murdered and nobody is accountable.
Yeah.
And I think that was the final push to have an inquiry to see, well, what did happen? And can it happen again?
There are a lot of points, that actually have been recommended by you. We will come down to them also. But the fact that a lot of evidence was lost out, a lot of lapses were there, we shouldn't have been there. Maybe you're giving it as a matter of recommendation for any future, a caution that the authorities might exercise. But the fact remains that who should be held accountable for those vital losses? Maybe in terms of the wiretaps which were erased, the way the investigative agencies had been going on, it seemed that they were particularly not interested in getting down to the bottom of the truth. They were way into the trial. I mean certain things started happening when the trial had already started, and there had to be critical media reports to get the investigative agencies into action.
You have to understand, when you're dealing with spies and intelligence, there's a certain paranoid. But when this system was set up, CSIS was to collect collect intelligence, but not evidence. So that their instructions were, after you've listened to the tape, erase it. Now, that seems not to make any sense. Nonetheless, that was the instructions. You collect intelligence only.
And then even after the tragedy had happened, after the investigation had
Exactly.
started, then there were no requests made by the Royal Canadian Police to have certain things kept recorded. Even there were no suggestions well way into the trial.
Well, after the plane crashed, they kept making recordings and destroying them. Now, people have criticized that, saying, well, we understand you had orders initially, in the usual case, to destroy the intelligence after you passed it to the RCMP. But surely, an unusual circumstance like an airplane blown up and 329 people killed, you keep everything. Well, they had a spy mentality. The rules said erase, they erased. Eventually, I think it was a couple of months before they started keeping them, keeping the tapes, which should have been kept, obviously, from the time the plane crashed, and even earlier, perhaps. That was a judgment decision that they made as to how they were going to operate. This goes back to criticism of the RCMP years ago in Quebec when there was a separatist government, and they claimed the RCMP were pulling dirty tricks. And they had an inquiry. And out of that inquiry, it was decided that the RCMP should be police and not get involved
into other
in
activities.
dirty tricks. That's